amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. Last week, I spoke to Dr. Campbell Costello, the flying vet. Well, this week, my guest could be described as the flying doctor. Dr. Damien Brown, the author of Band-Aid for a Broken Leg, discovered that being a doctor in outback Australia is just as challenging as working for Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders in Africa. So he wrote another book, this time called Bush Doctor, where he describes the incredible situations he finds himself in during his time as a doctor in outback of Australia, whether it be with the Flying Doctor Service or as a medic in an outback station. At the end of his book, he asks himself if maybe he shouldn't have chosen another profession. Well, let's find out. Welcome, Damien.
Morning. Thanks very much, Rosemary.
Now, Damien, you were born in South Africa. Tell us about that time. You said you were fairly shielded from apartheid when you were growing up there. So tell us a little bit about your childhood at that time.
Yeah, look, it's funny. I had a really lovely childhood, and I feel increasingly kind of self-conscious and a bit embarrassed saying that, given what was happening around me. But we grew up in Cape Town, which is an incredibly beautiful city. Anytime I go back to visit, I'm still convinced it's the prettiest city in the world. And it was in the last years of apartheid that I grew up, and so I went to a whites-only school. Everything was segregated racially. My school was whites only. The beaches that we went to were reserved for whites. There'd be a sign on the edge of the beach that would say whites only.
Yes.
The parks, the suburbs. And so my childhood, to me, felt very, I didn't have anything to compare it to.
No,
so I went to a great school, played sport, great beaches, and I had a very fun time. But when we came to Australia when I was 14, I kind of only then realised the full extent of apartheid and what had been happening there. So I always have felt a bit uncomfortable about the privileges and luck I had.
Right. Well, it's what the time was, of course, Damien. Now things have changed. But you then, you came to Australia. You were 14, as you say. So you went to school, obviously, here in Australia, and you decided to become a doctor here. So tell us a little bit about where you did your study.
I was pretty boring then. I went straight from high school in Melbourne to Monash Uni in Melbourne and did undergraduate medicine, which was pretty much the only option back in those days, that you just went straight from high school.
Yes.
Which increasingly feels like an absurd the proposition to a 17 or 18-year-old that you know exactly what you want to do.
Right.
But I studied at Monash and went through, and then worked in Geelong, in Vic, which is a beautiful spot, for a couple of years. And as soon as I could, I really enjoyed my time here, but I always just wanted to get back to Africa, or Southern Africa particularly. And as soon as I could, I applied and jumped ship to go work overseas.
Right. So what was it like? You'd left there when you were 14. You were obviously quite a bit older when you went back. What was it like to sort of arrive back in South Africa?
Well, it made me realise that I'd really grown up in a bubble. And, even though I'd grown up, in quote unquote Africa, Cape Town, certainly when I was growing up, was just such a bubble. It really was a very European outpost, as in, we just lived very comfortably and nicely. And then when I went back to work, I went back to Angola, which is 2 countries north from South Africa on the west coast of Africa. And I landed back there, and it was very clear to me instantly that this was, aside or just the real Africa, and a part of Africa I just really had no idea about. I was the only one of a handful of foreigners in town, but really everyone else was local. I didn't speak the language.
Yes. In fact,
Sorry.
Damien, they asked you, I think, what on earth are you doing there? Because it was unusual, they felt, wasn't it, for you to be so far away from where your home was and to have actually volunteered to your services to go over to that area. I mean, you describe it wonderfully in your book, Band-Aid for a Broken Leg. But I did smile when you said, they thought, well, what on earth are you running away from? Why are you here?
Yeah, I mean, I never expected a red carpet when I volunteered. I was warned by people that you have to prove yourself. You have to earn your keep in these places just because you're the kind of foreign doctor. No one's going to be like, oh, thank heavens you're here and shift heaven and earth. You have to kind of prove to people that you're going to be useful and respectful and kind. And so one of the health workers, in particular, when I got there in the first few weeks, used to press me a bit. And he asked me just directly at one point, he said, well, he was surprised, and a few of them were, that I was a volunteer. And they said, well, hang on a sec, does that mean you're not getting paid? And then I said, no, I came here just as a volunteer. And they were like, well, but if you come from a rich country and a safe country and you came to work out here, does that mean you're not very good? Like, why on earth can you not get a job back home? And why would you come here? And I thought that was a nice reframing, because to me, from Australia, and certainly at the time, it seemed like a very obvious thing to do, to go and work overseas. I mean, it's adventure. You hope that you're going to help. It's fascinating medicine, and it was just a very common thing to want to do, if not go through with.
Yes.
But from their perspective, it was nonsensical.
They couldn't understand it. But I mean, in areas such as Angola, Mozambique, and South Sudan, I mean, you were forced to operate with really severely limited resources, weren't you, Damien? I mean, that must have been a challenging time.
It is, but the interesting thing, well, the heartening thing, I think, for me was that a lot of the conditions there. So most patients that came in had infections, chest infections, diarrhea, malaria, sometimes HIV, TB, but most of that is very easy to treat. Obviously, HIV and TB needs longer term treatments and specialist medications, which we all had.
Yeah.
But most of what people come in, it's really the low hanging fruit. It's that we've dealt with in Australia, because we're a wealthier country and we have adequate sanitation, hygiene, health services.
Right.
But it's often just the really basic stuff still, just safe delivery.
Yes.
So you can do, I was horrified when I first got there, just maybe not horrified, but certainly shocked at just how basic things were.
Right.
But over the months and the subsequent trips I did, really, it's quite reassuring how much you can do with basic things.
And how long were you there, Damien, altogether?
The first posting was in Angola. That was 6 months.
Right.
And then I came back to training in Australia. And then I did another posting. I was supposed to be in Somalia for 6 months, but that fell apart because of security. And then I went to Mozambique for a couple of months for a flood. And then I went to South Sudan,
right,
which was supposed to be 9 months, which is a long time in a mud hut in South Sudan. I came to learn, and I left early because of security situation and various other issues.
Which is something, yes, you'd have to be looking out for all the time. So, as I've said, you write beautifully about that in your book, which I think is a wonderful title, Band-Aid for a Broken Leg, which probably tells it all. But now, Damien, then you came, of course, back to Australia, and you started working in the outback. And you open your book, The Bush Doctor, which I loved, with a scene in Central Hospital where, I mean, you're confronted with what sadly is a very common medical problem in our Indigenous community. In this case, it was Billy, wasn't it, who had, I think he had diabetes, kidney disease, and a few other things. So just tell us a little bit about somebody like Billy.
Yeah, so he was a guy who was actually younger than me, and I was in my mid-30s at the time when I first went there, and maybe even a bit younger. And he was a lovely Aboriginal man who used to come in often to the hospital and was struggling with heart failure, and he had absolute end stage heart failure and needed a heart transplant.
Right.
And I assumed he was far older than me just because, all the health conditions had taken their toll, and he didn't look very healthy anymore. And he was just so unwell that I was just like, oh, this poor guy, I imagine that he's quite elderly. But
Yes.
yeah, he was younger than me. And he was just a really sweet guy. He came in often. He didn't really want to talk about his health. He wanted to talk about going camping, and he wanted to get out of hospital every time as soon as he could, to just be with his family and to get out bush.
Yes.
And try and minimize his medications. But at the same time, he needed a heart transplant. He really probably needed to be in a bigger city, with far bigger hospital and more specialists. But he just didn't want those things. He chose his community and his home instead. And
right.
And that was the thing that I found. Well, I still find, because I still work up north, and
Yes.
just time and time again, it's not just that there's so much more illness, and that the rates are so much higher. It's also the age that things start.
Yes.
People are quite young with severe disease, not infrequently.
Well, it's just a hard situation, I would imagine. It makes it very hard from your point of view.
It is difficult, and you have to, you have to reframe. You're not going to these places to fix things.
Yes.
You're going to help people. You're going to meet them on their terms. So,
Right.
It's the patient's journey. It's their health. So you've often got to, quote unquote, negotiate.
Yes.
In terms of just trying to find a happy medium of what they want and what you think, from your kind of Western medicine perspective is ideal, and you just meet them in the middle. You've
You've got to respect their wants as well as trying to treat them. It was interesting, Damien, when I was talking to Dr. Campbell Costello, who's sort of known as the flying vet, who does, you may have heard of him, he does fly into a lot of the remote areas. He pointed something out to me, which, of course, I hadn't really thought about. But he said a lot of, sadly, the illnesses that young Indigenous children suffer from do, in actual fact, come from animals. Because, even, for instance, ticks in animals, and that they can get transferred through to children easily.
Yeah, and a lot of everything that I see comes down to crowded housing and poor housing, because people are often multiple families, or very large families, extended families, are crammed into one small house, and then people have pets, and there's an inadequate space. Often washing machines broken because the water's so hard, and just various other
hot.
problems. And it's hot. And if your air conditioner conks out there, it's very expensive, and to get a maintenance person. Yeah. So,
Damien, are there many Aboriginal or Indigenous doctors that are now working? You do say in your book that you've actually stepped away from Central, and there is actually an Aboriginal doctor leading the hospital. And then sadly, we also learnt that Billy died. And also Gloria, the artist who you became close to as well. Her daughter died, but you talked about the fact that an Aboriginal doctor had taken over at Central. So, going back to my original question, is that happening more often?
Yes.
Good.
There are. I mean, when I first went up to Central, probably like 15 years ago now, it was just locum doctors, so just casual doctors flying up from the city, and most of them were sort of my background, Melbourne white fella doctors. And now increasingly everywhere I work, there's far more Indigenous doctors, health workers, nurses in training, and also finished training that I work with.
Yes.
I don't know. I can't comment on whether it's proportionate, and there's definitely more need. But it's no longer rare.
Right.
Most places I work, or most shifts I do, there'll be someone on staff who's finished their training and from
terrific.
First Nations background.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
So
actually that's lovely to hear. Now, you're
yeah.
listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Dr. Damien Brown, author of Band-Aid for a Broken Leg and Bush Doctor. Now, Damien, you also work with the Flying Doctors. We were lucky enough to have a representative from the Flying Doctors come and talk to us a few months ago, and it was fascinating to hear the work that they do. I mean, you literally are a fly-in, fly-out, a FIFO, aren't you? Because particularly when you were working at Central and that, you'd go back to Melbourne, and then, of course, you'd fly up to Cairns, and the next minute you're going out as part of the Flying Doctors team.
Yeah, so the fly in, fly out. It used to be. I feel like in the older days, some of my I shouldn't say older days. That's so not specific, but a lot of my a lot of my more experienced colleagues used to live in these communities for long periods of time, months.
Yes.
And the model these days very much is that you go up, you spend. So I worked with the Flying Doctors up in Cairns, and we look after Cape York clinics.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was there last week, and a lot of, well, really all of the doctors that I work with, it's a fly in, fly out model. So you go in, you spend 3 days in the communities.
Right.
And then you fly out, and that aim is, continuity. So you have the same doctors or the same pair of doctors doing the same communities, ideally for years on end. And I think it seems to work well because you still have continuity of care. You're not there every day, but
Right.
it means that then people can keep doing it for years because they can still raise their families.
Yes.
And be home for, kids' sport on the weekend. And actually, yeah, it's not a huge, to move to one of these remote communities for a year is
it's a big chunk of your life, isn't it? Yeah. But you never know what's at the end of a phone call, do you? Because, I mean, one of your cases when you were working with the Flying Doctors there was a huge explosion, wasn't there? And a boiler explosion. And, I mean, that was very confronting. And it is hard, there's no doubt.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get. So we do, half the job is clinics where you fly up and, as I was saying, spend a few days there, and then that's great because you get the continuity and you by and large managing chronic disease, so trying to chip away, at the diabetes and the kidney disease and other issues, and then the other half of the job is the rescue flights. So you go and respond to emergencies that are taking place on the ground.
Right.
So. Yeah, that was one example. Just get a phone call, and two guys had been welding what they thought was an empty tank, and it turns out there was some fuel on the bottom, and it had exploded, and they had really quite confronting injuries. And so we flew out to a remote cattle station in Cape York and landed on a dirt strip and had to try and, a handful of us, try and stabilise them and get them into the back of an aircraft and then back down to Cairns.
Right. Do you ever do people ever keep in touch, ones like that you have rescued? I know, sadly, one of those patients died, but the others didn't, of course. Do people ever keep in touch with you when you've rescued them like that?
Often, yeah. Often the emails and stuff are from cases that I wouldn't expect it. So something like that, we all sort of stay in touch with, or follow up anyway, with the family, and call the hospitals in subsequent days and weeks just to see how the patients are going, because that's just such a dramatic case, and obviously you want to make sure people are, hopefully doing okay.
Yes.
But by and large, no. By and large, you do a flight. It's a normal day at work for you. You meet patients all the time, and what might be dramatic for them,
yes,
is for you just another day at work. And they go on with their recovery and journey, and you go on, and
yes,
it all becomes not in a negative way at all, but just in a normal way. That's, I think, part of the health system. It just becomes part of a normal day for you. So
Yeah. Even though
a
it's
dramatic night. For
absolutely life-saving for them. You say, and you make a point of the fact that you are always part of a team, Damien. I mean, there's so many, as you say, unsung heroes in the Outback and in such organisations as the RDFS. Are we still getting enough people wanting to be part of this medical, as you call it, tribe, servicing the remote parts of our vast land?
Yes and no. I think never enough.
Yeah.
There are always workforce shortages rurally, really everywhere I've worked. But there are far more doctors in training these days,
Right.
and the federal government's recognised a new specialty, which is rural generalism. So, which is good because previously it was kind of a grey area. Either you're a city specialist,
Yes.
which would include a GP. They are specialists and have their own specialty training.
Right.
And if you were going to go out to the bush and try do some anesthetics and obstetrics as well and cover a hospital, you would. It wasn't really a specialty in itself, but now the federal government's recognised that it is, and they've dedicated more money to training and places. So it's good, and a lot of doctors in training and medical students these days seem to specifically seek out that path, and I think it's got a pretty good reputation, particularly in places like where I've worked. So not criticising other states, but particularly in Queensland and
Right.
Western Australia, Northern Territory, it's got quite a good reputation because I think people see what they come out as medical students, or they see what we do and hear the stories, and they're like, oh, that sounds like a great career, which it is. Most of the time.
That's wonderful. Is it still, I mean, Campbell was telling us a huge cost of a vet is education, $100,000 to put yourself through a veterinary degree. Doctors are also up for a lot of money, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know exactly how much. I think there's all different funding models and places at the moment. I don't understand. I don't know exactly, but I often meet medical students and they say that they owe a couple of $100,000, for their undergrad and postgrad studies.
It's almost something you think should be. I mean, we are, crying out for people to work in those sort of areas. You almost think we should be paying them to be educated. How do you switch off, Damien?
Still working on it. I'll let you know when I've cracked the code. But I sometimes just have to step away. I have definitely over the years got to points where I've just done too much on call, and you stop seeing individuals as you'd like to see them, and it just becomes an endless conveyor belt sometimes, particularly emergency departments. It can become exhausting. So I deliberately step out when I feel that's happening. I will take a week off, spend time with family. I did a silent retreat once for 10 days where you talk and you sit
actually, yes, one of my grandsons did that, and I was amazed that he didn't talk.
It was tricky. Yeah, it was very rewarding. I think, the main thing is I feel like it's a career, any career, I think is, a marathon, not a sprint. And so I just continually just try and reframe things. And you have to look for, as I'm sure in many jobs, you've got to make sure you sort of focus on the small things, the small gains.
Yeah.
So, often, you have bad cases or meet lovely patients like Billy with, severe disease who, succumbs, unfortunately. But most patients you see during the day that, are undramatic cases, they're really good outcomes. A kid with a sore ear, you assessing them, having a great conversation with their family and getting them on antibiotics, that means that they're less likely to have language delay potentially or learning difficulties because, of hearing loss. So, and it's not dramatic.
It's rewarding.
And you don't. So I just more deliberately focus on those and take the wins.
So do you ever think you should have chosen another profession, as you say?
Yeah.
At times.
No, I said there was a moment in the book where, after a run of very difficult night shifts in a violent week in a remote community in Central Australia, I definitely, and I have often thought this, as a throwaway line, I think, oh, I should have been a surgeon instead or something, or an eye specialist, because, you have skilled hands.
Yes.
You feel like you're fixing things. You go in, there's a problem, you fix it. It's mechanical and you can do something. And a lot of what I see in the communities is, there are social issues,
Yes.
a lot of social issues, mental health issues.
It's right across the spectrum, isn't it, that you're involved in? But Damien, sadly, we have run out of time. I can see Paul there waving through the window. Look, it really has been an eye-opener talking to you, and I'm very glad that you haven't thought of doing another profession, because we certainly need people like you. And Damien's book, of course, is The Bush Doctor, which is available in all bookstores and online. And his book before that was Band-Aid for a Broken Leg. Thank you very, very much, Damien, for being my guest. Now, do you actually have a web page that our listeners, and also, is your book in audio?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
terrific. Because not many of our listeners are sight impaired, so to have it in audio would be terrific. Do you read it yourself?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah, and I'm actually next week recording the first book. The Band-Aid for a Broken Leg wasn't in audio,
right?
And it will be after next week. But Bush Doctor is currently through any audiobook seller should be available.
Right. Well, Damien, thank you very, very much for being my guest. This program,
my pleasure, Rosemary.
And this program has been recorded in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia, and will be available on my YouTube channel, Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Thank you, Damien.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.